Hey there, my name's Brent Pearson and I'm a keen adventure bike rider and video enthusiast. I can't add much in terms of motorbike riding because I'm a pretty average rider, but I used to work as a professional cameraman and was trained formally by the ABC in terms of editing, sound and camera work. So that's one area where I think I can add some value. So this series that I'm putting together is kind of like a complete guide to how to get the best GoPro quality on YouTube for motorbike riding especially. So I've done a ton of research. I found a lot of conflicting advice out there, and where I found conflicting advice, I've done my own tests and experiments and put together what I hope is a pretty comprehensive series about just how to make your GoPro motorbike videos look amazing on YouTube. Enjoy. Okay, so let me tell you how I'm going to structure these 5 lessons. There are kind of 3 phases to producing these videos. Starting on the left, there's the production phase. Then we have the post-production phase in the middle there. And on the right, we actually have the exporting of the video and uploading to YouTube. So here's how I'm going to cover these topics. I'm going to start on the right-hand side with exporting your video from the computer and uploading it to YouTube. And the reason I'm starting here is there's some low-hanging fruit that anybody can do that will improve your videos really quickly. So that's what we're going to cover today. Then in the next lesson, I'm going to cover the GoPro settings. In lesson 3, we're going to talk about how to get good audio. In lesson 4, I'm going to make the case for why you should consider using neutral density filters on your camera. And then finally, I'm going to finish up with the post-production, and I'll talk about how to actually really transform your GoPro footage when you're doing your editing. I realized pretty quickly that not everyone wants to go to the same level of effort as I do, but you still want to improve your GoPro footage. So I've created 3 different personas to try and reflect the different types of people out there. The first is one I've called Simple Sam. And Simple Sam just wants to make wicked shots to share with friends. Doesn't want to muck about with editing, doesn't want to spend any more money. The second persona is what I call Joe Average. And Joe doesn't know that much about video production, but if there are simple things that he can do to make footage better, then he's going to do it. Happy to do some editing, but doesn't want to muck about and spend a lot of time in post-production. And doesn't mind buying a few little things if they're really going to help with the production, but doesn't want to spend money on, video production kit. And then the last persona, and this is where I fall, is what I call Anal Al. And Anal Al wants to produce the highest quality videos that he can and really enjoys the production process. So enjoys post-production, finds it a creative and fun part of the process, and is happy to buy extra gear if it really helps improve the quality. So I'll be referencing these 3 different personas, and I'll be giving you different settings and different sort of recommendations depending on who you are. So with that, let's kick off with chapter 1, which is exporting and uploading your footage to YouTube. So I'm going to try and keep this non-technical without much theory, but there's one word I just want to make sure everyone understands, and that's the word codec. And what a codec is basically it's software that typically does the compression of the video and the audio, and then does the decompression from a compressed video signal. And it comes from the word coder, decoder, and that's how codec is. So now that you know what a codec is, all you need to understand is that YouTube has 2 different codecs, and they go by the catchy names of AV01 and VP09. Now, all you need to understand about these 2 codecs is that AV01 is a lower quality codec and VP09 is a higher quality codec. And I'm going to put a card up in the top right corner. If you want to actually see tests and experiments that have been done showing you the difference in quality, click on that card and it'll sort of show you the difference in quality. But the bottom line is you want your videos to use VP09. Now, from what I've heard and read, VP09, it's a much higher quality codec, but it actually uses a lot more computing power and can take a lot more time to actually encode your videos. And I've heard one explanation that VP09 generally gets used for the sort of influencers or the VIP, YouTube content creators, and the everyday person, they get the AV01 codec by default. Now, I'm going to show you how you can actually tell which codec is being used in a video, and then more importantly, I'm going to show you how to force YouTube to use the VP09 codec. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to actually tell what encoder has been used for a video. Now, I've just gone to the website of an Australian motorbike blogger called $1 Million Bogan, who is a great storyteller. And I'm just going to have a look at a couple of his more recent videos. So here's his latest one, Fighting in Tasmania, I'm Going Home Early. Now, if I click on that video, okay, so I'm just going to pause it. So once the YouTube video is up and running, if you control click on a Mac or right click, it brings up this pop-up menu. And the option that we want to look at is this one at the bottom, which is Stats for Nerds. And if you click on that, it'll actually bring up a very geeky, techie box. But what I want you to look at, you see on the 5th row down, it says codecs. And you can see it says VP09. So this video is using VP09, the high quality codec. Now, what's interesting is if we just go back, and if I just choose, say, this video, Tasmania's Most Beautiful Beach, and again, I pause it, I bring up the Stats for Nerds, you can see here, this one, codec is AV01. So this video is being used, has used the lower quality codec, whereas that previous video has used the high quality one. So that's how you can very easily tell which codec a video is being compressed with. So that brings up the obvious question, and that is, can I force YouTube to use the higher quality VP9 codec? And the answer is yes, you can. And basically the way you do it is you actually export your video at a minimum resolution of 2.7K or 4K. So, and it seems that automatically puts YouTube into using the high quality codec. Now, one thing just to be aware of, I found that it doesn't necessarily immediately use VP9. So, and I don't know whether it's when YouTube is busy or not, but there have been times where I've uploaded the video and it's processed the standard definition. I've looked at the codec, and the codec says the lower quality AC1, and then I wait. And sometimes you actually have to wait several hours, and then it flips it over to the high quality VP9. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how on Premiere we actually set that. Okay, so I'm in my editor of choice, which happens to be Adobe Premiere Pro. And one thing just to note about Premiere, and I'm going to cover this in the post-production, is when I'm editing, the settings that I'm choosing are sort of high-definition TV settings, 1920 pixels wide by 1080 high. And so that's what I'm using for actually doing the editing. But when we want to export it, in order to use the high quality compressor, we actually need to export it at a higher resolution than we're editing. So to export this video for YouTube, I'm going to say export media. And this is where we actually sort of control everything. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to say I don't want to match the source on my output. I want my output to be at 2.7K resolution. So that happens to be 2704 pixels times 1520 high. So that is a resolution of 2.7K. And by exporting into that size, YouTube will now use the higher quality compressor. Now, the second thing that you can do here is to increase the quality of the file that you're exporting. And this is my second major tip for how to get the best quality footage. If you think about the typical images for motorcycle videos, you've got a lot of detail that's flying through the frame very quickly. That makes it extremely difficult for codecs to do a good job. And all of the default sort of settings for quality, and that's these bitrate settings, they tend to be way too low. So you can see this is basically set to limit the compression rate or the data rate to be about 12 megabits per second. And what I find is with motorbike videos, that results in degradation even before you get it up to YouTube. So what I recommend you do is change that to be VBR 2-pass, so it's variable bitrate 2-pass, and I would then crank this up. So I usually crank it all the way to the maximum, which is 50 and 50. And that means you're going to get a bigger file, but you're going to get a higher quality file. And, you know, I think you should be starting with the highest quality you've got, because YouTube's going to still do some compression anyway with the VB9 codec. But if you're giving YouTube a clumpy, lower quality file, it's only going to make it worse. So that is my my second recommendation on how to get the highest quality. I usually choose maximum render quality, and that's it. I'll now hit export, and I'll go and get a coffee or a glass of wine. So hope you found those two major tips useful. Forcing YouTube to use VP9 by exporting in 2.7K, and then turning up the compression settings to pretty much maximum, 50 megabits per second. And for me, I'd rather pay the price in a higher quality YouTube by uploading a bigger file. Now, this is all very well if you're Joe Average or Anal Al, but what about if you're Simple Sam? What about if you actually don't do any editing? How do you actually use the high quality compressor? Well, the answer to that is you make sure that on your GoPro settings, you're shooting at a resolution of 2.7K or 4K, and we're going to cover that in the next lesson.